Behind these crumbling walls, beneath these shadowed floors, something stirs. A whisper from the past, a breath from beyond the grave. This is not just a house, it is a doorway. And tonight, we step through. Subscribe for more chilling tales, and tell us in the comments, would you spend the night here? Cleveland, Ohio was a city of grit and ghosts. The wind off Lake Erie carried more than just the scent of rust and rotting fish. It carried voices. Detective Mark Henson noticed it first. Called to an abandoned warehouse near the flats for a missing persons case. He found the walls inside covered in strange, wet scratches, like something had dragged its claws through layers of mold. The air smelled like copper and brine. And then, under the groan of distant freighters, he heard it, a whisper, just beneath the sound of the waves. The missing person, a dock worker named Carl Varga, was found 3 days later. Not in the river, not in some back alley, but sitting upright in his own living room, his skin bloated and gray, his lungs filled with black water, his lips were sewn shut with fishing line. More disappearances followed. A waitress from Ohio City, last seen staring into the Cuyahoga at midnight. A homeless man near Edgewater Park, his tent soaked from the inside out. Each body was found dry but drowned, their mouths sealed shut, their ears leaking brackish sludge. Mark dug into old records, found stories from the 1800s, sailors who swore the lake spoke to them, luring ships into storms. A cholera outbreak in 1832, where victims claimed to hear singing in the water before they died. And then, the worst of it, a faded police report from 1954, detailing a cult that worshipped something they called the thing in the depth. Their last ritual? Sewing their own mouths shut before walking into the lake. One sleepless night, Mark stood on Whiskey Island, the waves lapping hungrily at the shore. The wind hissed through the skeletal remains of old steel mills, and beneath it, the whispers came again, louder now. He felt it, then a cold, slithering pressure around his ankles. The lake wasn't just whispering. Detective Mark Henson woke, gasping, his sheets soaked through with icy water that hadn't been there when he fell asleep. His ankles ached, bruised in the unmistakable shape of fingers. He could still hear the whispers, slithering through the hum of his apartment's radiator. The next morning, the coroner's report on Carl Varga made no sense. The water in his lungs wasn't from the Cuyahoga, or even Lake Erie. It was older, thick with decaying algae and something else, something that shouldn't exist in fresh water. The lab techs called it anomalous particulate matter. Mark called it rot. This one was found in the old Coast Guard station, now a crumbling relic on the east bank. The victim, a young woman named Lisa Tran, was propped against a rusted radar console, her lips stitched. His hands shook as he called in the crime scene team, but he already knew. No fingerprints, no footprints, just the lingering stench of dead water, and the creeping certainty that whatever was taking these people wasn't just killing them. That night, he drove to Edgewater Park, the one place he swore he'd never go after dark. The beach was empty, the black expanse of Lake Erie breathing slow, hungry waves onto the shore. Standing waist-deep in the water, perfectly still. Their mouths were sewn shut, their eyes were open, and they were all looking at him. Mark stumbled back, but the sand beneath his feet shifted, sucking him down like wet cement. The whispers rose to a chorus, hissing through the wind, through his own pulse in his ears. You see them now. Soon you'll see everything. The water wasn't just in the lake anymore. Mark Henson didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. The figures in the water, their stitched lips, their stolen eyes. The coroner's report on Lisa Tran burned in his mind. Ocular extraction appears to have occurred post-mortem, yet vitreous fluid suggests the victim was still alive when. The next call came at 3:17 a.m. Another floater, But this one wasn't like the others. The body was found in the abandoned Euclid Beach Park bathhouse, a relic from Cleveland's Gilded Age, now crumbling into the shore. The victim, a middle-aged man in a waterlogged suit, sat slumped against the cracked tile wall, his face a grotesque mockery of the others. His lips weren't just sewn shut. From chin to nose, his mouth had been erased, skin fused like melted wax. His hands were clasped in prayer fingers, interlaced with strands of knotted kelp, and in his lap, resting in a pool of brine, was a single, milky eye. Mark's radio crackled. Dispatch reporting another missing person, a history professor from Case Western, last seen researching Great Lakes occult practices. His notes were still open on his desk, circled in red ink. The drowning ritual, 1919. Cult believed the lake could be made sentient if fed enough voices. Victims' mouths were sealed to trap their screams inside, creating a Mark's vision swam. A metallic tang filled his mouth. He spat into his hand, black water wriggling with translucent worms. That night he dreamt of the lake, not as water, but as something alive, a vast, pulsing throat swallowing the city whole. The standing figures were closer now, their hollowed faces tilted toward him. The whispers had gotten louder. Now they didn't just come from the water. They came from inside a wet, slithering voice, curling behind his ribs. You resist, but your bones remember the tide. He drove to Edgewater Park one last time, the trunk of his car heavy with stolen evidence, a police-issue revolver, and a gutted copy of Folk Horrors of the Great Lakes, its margins scribbled with the professor's frantic notes. The cult called it the first drowning. Not a god, but something older, a memory from when the lakes were glaciers grinding flesh into the earth. It doesn't want worship, it wants echoes, screams trapped in water, eyes to see through, mouths to use. The page ended in a water-stained smear. The beach was empty. No cops, no late-night joggers, just the lake, black and still as a held breath. Mark dragged his materials to the shore, building a pyre of case files and salt-rotted wood. They stood just beyond the breakers, their silhouettes warped by the moon's glare. Closer now, waiting. Her mouth was still sewn shut, but her hollow sockets glistened, filled not with eyes, but with swirling water. She raised a hand, and the lake surged around her ankles in eager ripple. The files ignited with a hiss, flames licking at the professor's notes. The thing in the lake shrieked, a sound like ice splitting, like 1,000 drowning throats gasping at once. The standing figures lurched backward, their stitched mouths straining against invisible thread. Fire raced across the lake's surface, burning where no flame should catch. Because it wasn't water anymore, it was oil, ancient, bubbling up from something best left buried. The figures writhed, their flesh sloughing off in greasy ribbons. Lisa collapsed her stitches, dissolving into black foam. Mark fell to his knees, vomiting gallons of brackish sludge. When he looked up, the lake was flat again. But in the silence, under the sirens screaming in the distance, 3 weeks later the city declared the case closed. Toxic algae, mass hysteria. He lives in a cabin now, far inland. But every night he checks the pipes, listens for the drip of water where none should be. And when he dreams, he sees them standing in the dark just beyond his window. He'd torn them all out after the first night, when his reflection mouthed words his ears couldn't hear, its lips moving out of sync, its eyes too wide. The doctors called it PTSD. The priest who came to bless the property called it something else entirely, then left in a hurry when the faucets began to weep black water. But Mark knew the truth, not just dead, but hollowed out, its skeleton picked clean, its eye sockets gaping. It lay on his porch steps, arranged in a perfect spiral. The next morning there were 12 more, then 50, then too many to count. Their tiny, toothless mouths stretched open in silent screams. The radio spat static when he tried to call for help. The landline dripped brine. When he drove into town, the streets were empty, but the gutters ran with water that moved against the slope of the pavement. creeping toward his tires, like grasping fingers. Inside the shelves were stocked, the register full, but the owner, old Bill Hendricks, was gone. Only his glasses remained, resting on the counter, the lenses fogged with condensation. Mark pressed his palm to the glass door, and something pressed back from the other side. It came from the woods behind his cabin, a chorus of voices that were almost human, if human throats could gargle lake water and still form words. Mark loaded his shotgun with salt rounds the way his grandfather had taught him when he was a boy hunting Appalachian ghosts. But what waited in the trees wasn't a ghost. Her skin had taken on the pallor of something waterlogged too long, her hair drifting around her face like pondweed. When she opened her mouth, the stitches were gone, but so was her tongue. In its place, a fat, blind catfish writhed, its gills fluttering against her teeth. "You should have drowned with us," the voices chorused through her. Behind her, more figures emerged from the dark. The missing professor, old Bill Hendricks, Carl Varga, his stomach swollen with lake water, and dozens more, their eyes milky, their throats vibrating with that terrible, wet song. The blast tore through Lisa's chest, sending her stumbling back, but no blood came, only water, a flood of it, gushing from the wound in a torrent that shouldn't have fit inside a human body. The other figures didn't flinch, they just kept singing, their voices rising, the ground beneath Mark's feet turning to mud. He woke in the shallows, their Ladius comes mating in Johnwood pours. Dawn was breaking, the sky streaked with blood-red light. Out on Lake Erie, the fishermen tell stories now of a man they sometimes see walking the waves at night, his mouth moving in silent prayer. A found document, waterlogged and handwritten, recovered from a locked drawer in the abandoned Euclid Beach bathhouse by urban explorers in October 2023. The last entry is dated 3 days after Mark Henson's disappearance. The fish bones keep appearing in my coffee cup between mattress sheets. This morning I woke with one lodged vertically in my throat, like a blasphemous communion wafer. When I pulled it out, the tip was black with something that wasn't blood. The singing hasn't stopped. Since Edgewater, it's quieter now. A wet humming just behind my molars. I can taste the lake when it surges. My dentist would weep if he saw what's happening to my gums. It was in the refrigerator, where I'd left a 6-pack of Great Lakes Brewing. The bottles were still cold, but the labels had dissolved into pulp, floating in each one a single human iris pupil, blown wide, like it had seen the bottom of the lake. Their leases, I'd know that shade of brown anywhere. When I smashed the bottles in the sink, the shards cut patterns in my palms, tiny rivers mirroring the Cuyahoga's crooked path through the flats. The blood ran upward. I didn't drive there. The roads did that thing again, where the asphalt ripples like water, carrying me east while my hands shook on the wheel. The boarded-up entrance had rotted away, in perfect circles, keyholes for something much larger. They'd arranged another body for me in the drained swimming pool. Young Hispanic male, dressed in a Coast Guard uniform that went out of service in 1976. His service revolver was still in its holster. His mouth wasn't sewn shut. It was welded. The flesh around his lips bubbled and fused, like the steel mills used to do to scabs who talked to OSHA. When I touched his chest, the skin split open like a well-cooked brisket. No organs, just gallons of standing water and a single rusted boat propeller where his heart should be. The professor's notes were right. It's not a god, it's the lake remembering itself. Every drowned sailor, every suicide off the Hope Memorial Bridge, every kid who ever disappeared during a 4th of July swim, they're all down there, singing the water into something that can want. They're waiting outside Lisa Carl, the professor, all the others. Their song shakes the foundation. The ceiling rains lake water, even though we haven't had storms in weeks. I'm putting the barrel in my mouth as I write this, not to die, to invite. When they find this note, and they will tell my sister, I kept my promise. Tell her to listen for me in the rain, on the Superior Viaduct. Tell her the final words are illegible, the paper warped by what appears to be a single massive water droplet. Forensic analysis confirmed the presence of Lake Erie plankton and an unidentifiable saline compound in the ink. The drawer where it was found required 3 grown men to open, despite having no lock. When asked why they kept trying, all 3 reported hearing somebody knocking from the inside.